Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2025. I don't have any particular ROUGOL announcements. I might have the next month sorted, but I'm not confirmed yet. And the one after that is also maybe, but not confirmed. So I won't say anything just in case it doesn't happen. Yes, if anyone hasn't known, as we were just showing, the Riscos North show is now confirmed on the 29th of March. This year, so that's a nice new show in a new location in Warrington. So ROUGOL will be there. A few other people, I'm sure. Other than that, if you are ready, Graeme, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us all about T-Wimp. Take it away.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, there's a lot of faces I don't recognise on here, and I'm sure many of you don't recognise me either. I've been programming Acorn computers since the days of the BBC through Riscos 2, Riscos 3, but I've never released anything back on those days. And shortly after Acorn disappeared, I left the scene. I didn't really come back on it again until COVID, with all the lockdowns, and gave us a bit of time, and the Raspberry Pis. So I do have quite a big gap. And coming back to Riscos, one of the things I always liked to program was the Wimp. But coming back to it, I realised how fiddly it is and how difficult it is, especially for newcomers to it. And I looked at a few different solutions on what we could do to possibly make it easier for people who either want to get applications up and running quickly, or people who are beginners, or even people who are already using the Wimp and maybe want to try a different language. Because it's a module, you can use it with any language that supports SWISE. So if, for example, you have a program working in BASIC and you program that in T-Wimp, it's quite simple to then try and move it over to Python or Lua or C, if that's a language that you're wanting to learn. It's a bit difficult to describe exactly how it works, so the best way of doing it is to actually demonstrate it. So I'll share my screen and we'll actually start to build an application just to show how simple the SWI calls all are. So let me see if this is working right. Have a zoom window a little bit in the way here. There we go. So hopefully you should all be able to see that screen. Shout up if you can't. The first thing is I've created a short application which is got nothing in T-Wimp in it at the moment. And we're going to create a little application which takes notes. We're going to have a clock in an icon and a writable icon, and then we'll be able to save that data off into a custom file, and we're going to write it from scratch. So in here, I have got a couple of files that I've made. We'll go through them. There's the boot file and the run file, and they are pretty standard for a Riscos application. Just setting a system variable, getting the icon sprites, checking that the T-Wimp module is loaded, setting the Wimp slot, and then running the actual basic program as it is in this case. And the other thing that I've set up, I'm sure you don't want to watch me create sprites live, is 4 sprites. The application one, the custom file, and there's even 2 sprites there designed for the pinboard. So nothing in there is anything to do with T-Wimp. That's just standard Riscos procedure. The basic program, as you can see, not much to that either, just one line, which is an error handler. So let's start and actually get into T-Wimp. The first thing that you might have noticed is it's got a T in the front, and that stands for text. A lot of the SWI calls that you do, instead of building up bits and bytes and blocks, an awful lot of it is to do with text. In fact, most of it is you typing in English, which is much easier for beginners than the reason codes and numbers and handles. To start an application, we will just call T-Wimp start, and if you've used the Wimp before, you normally need to put in all version numbers. T-Wimp just takes the parameter, which is the application name. So we've got notes, and to end the application, we just call T-Wimp end, and then we'll end the basic program. If we run that, that will start an application and close it. Obviously, you can't see it because it does it so quickly. There needs to be a poll loop, and the poll loop is generally copy and paste. So rather than me having to type it all in, I will drag what is essentially the same for every program, a loop, and I'll go down these lines. Line 5 starts the loop on a repeat. Line 6 is your first T-Wimp call, and basically you just get 3 parameters, put them into the real Wimp SWI call, get 3 parameters back out, put them back into another T-Wimp. It's a shame we have to do it this way, but the Wimp is a bit odd when you're running from a module. The important thing is this last bit we get here. We get a reason, but you'll notice that's a reason $, so that's a string. This block we'll come to later, and we will keep on looping around until we get the word quit, which is a standard T-Wimp return parameter. So we just keep on looping around until the reason equals quit. If we run that application, again, we'll see nothing until we go into the task manager. And in there, we have our little task called notes, just running nicely. And if we go to the quit, that should just quit. Obviously, we need to have some way of seeing icons on the icon bar or windows, various things that the user can interact with. The simplest way of doing it is actually to create a text file. You can do it inline in the program, but certainly for beginners and for demonstration purposes, it's a lot easier. So I'll create a text file, and I'll just call it TW for T-Wimp. Put it in there. We'll leave that blank at the moment, and we will load this text file in. We just use T-Wimp load, and then the file name. So that's notes$dir dot, what do I call it? TW. I'll just run that for a second and check it doesn't crash. Oh, hang on a second. My notes directory is pointing somewhere else. There we go. So our notes program is still running, and it's loaded this file in and processed it. Obviously, there's nothing to process, so we see no difference at the moment. To create items, and we call them items in T-Wimp, an item can be anything from an icon, a menu, a window, a menu item. We put them in the angled brackets, and we just describe what they are. There's lots of different types. To create an icon bar, it's just called icon bar. And then we type, just in English, what we want it to do. So we want it to be a sprite, and I want it to be the application sprite, which is exclamation mark notes. Save that off and run it, and we have an icon on the icon bar. Doesn't do anything, of course, because we haven't told it to do anything yet. So let's get a menu up with the quit option. To create a menu, it's probably what you think, menu, and the text, or you can type in title. The nice thing about T-Wimp is there's lots of different ways you can describe exactly the same thing. So you can spell colour the American way, the British way, you can use text or title. So you don't have to remember a specific exact thing, which makes it a lot easier as well. So the title of our menu will be notes, and then we will create a menu item. Again, you can call that menu item in full. You can call it item just for short. And I'll put some text in there, which says quit. That's all well and good that we've created a menu, but we need to get that icon bar to be able to open it. So what we'll do is on the icon bar, we will set what is an action. All the actions begin with the word on. The mouse buttons are all standard, so on menu. We want to open up the icon bar menu, and this is an action, and there's two different types of actions, and we'll go through them. We'll go through both of them now. The first type of action is one that T-Wimp will try and handle itself, and they always start with a subtract sign. We want to open, so there's a command for T-Wimp, and we want to open up the icon bar menu. I'll just call that icon bar menu. It, of course, doesn't know what icon bar menu is yet. So we want to name this menu as an icon bar menu. Just like that. All of these items can be named. It's optional if you want to name them or not. So we're not dealing with pointers and handles. And if we run that, the menu opens. And you'll also notice we haven't had to position the icon on the icon bar. We haven't had to position this menu. It's worked it all out for us. Clicking quit, nothing happens. So we'll have to quit from the task manager. We can do the other type of action here. I'll just line it up for clarity. On this item, we will add an action on here for on click. When you click on the item, this time we're not going to start it with a subtract sign. We're just going to type a word, and I'm going to type quit in uppercase. If you don't start it with a T-Wimp command, it will return into your program in this reason dollar, and we're already handling ending the program if reason dollar equals quit. So if we run that, that should now loop around. When I click the menu, it should open up the icon bar menu, which is this one. And when I click quit, it should send quit back to the program here, and then end the program. Let's see if that works. Nope, it would help if I clicked it. And there we go, it's gone. So it's as simple and as quick as that. We can also tidy this up to make it look a little bit more professional. There's pre-formatted windows. So let's make a program info box. And we'll, again, just describe what things are. Submenu, it won't work if you spell it wrong. Submenu, and we'll call that an about box. Now, we haven't created the submenu, so what will happen is we have the info, but there isn't a submenu there. So T-Wimp will protect you from doing things that are potentially wrong, rather than point to random bits of memory and end up with crashes. A pre-formatted window, there's plenty of them. There is one called about, and we can give it the same name. And I'm not even going to define anything in there at the moment. We have our about menu, or our about this program window already created. We fill these in. These pre-formatted ones can have special descriptions that you can describe about them. And this one is as simple as filling in what's on the left-hand side and describing the text on the right. You'll notice that, or you may have noticed, that the name is already filled in, and that's what we provided into T-Wimp start. You can override that if you want, but we could just keep it as it is, and we could just decide the purpose is the demo, author is ROUGOL, and we'll just say version is 1, just to keep it simple. That's literally enough to fill that box in. And we now have our about this program not quite spelt right. We'll try that again. So that's better. Spelling ROUGOL wrong on a ROUGOL meeting. So it's quick to get things, it's very, very quick to get things up and running, and we haven't used any maths, and we haven't even edited the basic program for quite a long time now. We will next create the window so that we can put the clock in it and the writable icon. As you may have guessed, it's window, and we'll just call this one main window. The text, we will give it the title of notes, and well, let's just give it a size. Let's say 500 by 500. Again, we're going to need to do something to get that window to open, so we'll do on select, and we'll tell T-Wimp to open the main window. Windows by default open at the center of the screen, so hopefully clicking select opens up that window as quickly as that. Just like the about window, which is pre-formatted, we can use pre-formatted icons as well. There's a whole list of icons. So you may imagine that we would start off with an icon like that, but we actually want to display the data. So we're going to display the time in a clock. So that's a display icon, and that will give us the correct colors, the 3D effect that is standard from the style guide. And we'll just call this one time. We'll give it a name so we can refer to it later on. And that's a shorthand way of doing it, but text time. That's enough to create an icon. And again, you may have noticed that we haven't positioned the icon or anything. T-Wimp will try and automatically calculate various things of where they'll go, just to make things easy for you. The width of it, though, is far too small because we're going to use the date and the time. But changing the width is just as easy as typing in width. Let's make it 1200 wide. Mouse pointer's gone. So it's much bigger than the window now. So there's our first problem. There's an easy solution for that, though. Let's take the size, and let's just auto size the window. Whenever you make icons, every time the window will be automatically sized to fit. You can also do the furniture, make the window look a lot better, and some of the commands, just no scroll bars. We'll take all of the scroll bars off in just one command. So there's our window with no scroll bars and an icon, and all automatically sized. Let's update the time on that next, and for that we're going to need to go back to the basic program, and we're going to test it first. By doing an on-click event. So when we click the time, we will return something back to our old program, and we'll call that timer. So now we're sending the word timer back to our program. We're going to need to handle that. So we'll do that here. When timer, what we want to do is update this icon with the current date and time, just every time we click. To do that in T-Wimp, we can literally just use T-Wimp, update text, and then we need to say what the icon is. it's text. So we want to update the icon that we called time, and Basic kindly has an inbuilt variable called time dollar. We'll just do that and use that. We run that application out and the time updates. So that's currently working, but only when we click. It would, of course, be nice to get that to update every second. So let's give that a go. We'll take the on click off, and in our basic program, we will add a timer. And we need to tell it what we want to return to the program, which we've already decided is the word timer, and then how often we want that to occur. So and that's in centiseconds, so that's 100 centiseconds. And that's enough of a program to actually get a clock working on the desktop, which we've done in 10 or 15 minutes, maybe slightly longer. To create the writable icon, we just do writable, and we want to make this as a note. I'm going to call it note. This is probably the only one where you have to really specify the text length. A writable icon. Basic allows us to have 255 characters. We'll allow it to have 255. And you may notice something here. That writable icon has also copied its width from the icon above. Again, it's positioned straight underneath as well. So I haven't had to position it. You can position it, but it's so often easy to just allow T-Wimp to do this automatically for you. Another thing is when we open it up, you may have noticed that the caret doesn't appear in this icon. It would be nice if we opened up this window and the caret appeared. Well, it's no programming. We can just set the word caret in your writable icon. And whenever that window is opened, it sets the caret straight in it. No programming necessary for the basic tasks. We'll create a menu for the main window next, and we'll put a save window in there. And we'll do the save protocol, which is significantly simplified compared to the way that the Wimp normally does it. So we'll make our main menu. The text is our application name. We'll create an item in that menu. Text will be save. And this one will have a submenu of a save, of something we call save. And we will create a save window and call it save as well. The main menu obviously won't open yet because I need to put an action in here on menu, and we will ask T-Wimp to just open that menu we've just created, main menu. And there's our menu and our save box. The save box is of the new format. If you are running this on something like RISCOS 3.1 or the older window manager, that will automatically be in the older format, so everything stays consistent to the style guide. It is flexible and modifies what it does depending on what version of the Wimp and operating system are actually being run. You may have noticed that everything in there is just very default. We've got untitled and we've got the wrong file type. We had our own custom file type. That's, again, just as easy as saying file name. Let's call it a note. And the file type is, well, I happen to know it was in hexadecimal 012. Our save box now has everything we've requested. And all we need to do now is to be able to drag this icon to here and actually start the save. So we're going to need to do something, which is another action to initiate that. And that's in the save box itself. And you type unsave and what you want to return to your program when the user has initiated a save. And that will come whether they press enter in the save box, click OK, or drag the icon. Let's handle that in the basic program. So going back to the basic program, we will create a new option, and we will actually create a function this time to handle it. Of course, we don't know at the moment what the file name is. So how do we know where to save? T-Wimp gives you all kinds of information from a SWI called pull data. Then you need to tell it what you want to actually read. And we want to read what the file name is. So we literally give it the string file name. Easy to remember. And we'll put that in a variable. We'll call it $. What I will do to start off with is we will just create that file, close the file, and we won't save any data in it initially, just to test that that works. And the first thing I'm going to do is open the file for writing. And here I've used a T-Wimp miscellaneous operation. There's lots of them. And this one opens a file. We give it the file name and we give it the file type, and we get the file handle out of here. And you might wonder why I don't just use the ordinary operating system. T-Wimp obviously does in the background. And we'll close file handle. The reason I'm using the T-Wimp open and close is simply if I make a mistake while this file is open, T-Wimp keeps an eye out whether your task ends or whether it crashes, and it will close the file automatically for you. If you've ever programmed the WIMP before and you've made a mistake in the middle of saving a file, it can be horrendous trying to get that file closed again. So that should be enough to actually save an empty file. Let's hope for the best. And there we go, we have an empty file. So just a few lines of code. We have read what the file name is, opened the file, and closed the file. Would be nice to actually put the data in there, of course, otherwise that's a bit pointless. The first thing we'll do is we'll just print the time in there. So in BASIC, you can just use the print command, and we'll just use the basic variable. We also want to put the note in there, which means we're going to need to read whatever the user's typed into that note and put it into a variable. We'll call it note $. To read from T-Wimp, you can just use T-Wimp, and you can either use read text and then type in where you want to read the text from. And we called this is here, we called it note. To note $. An alternative way of reading and updating things is this just a general one. And I'm just going to use the general one just to show how easy it is to read things. You give it the name, and then you tell it what you want to read. So in this case, I want to read the text. It may be that I want to read whether that icon is grayed out or whether it's selected or all kinds of things. But we're going to read the text, put it in note $, and then save it in the file. And all being well, Now, the basic print command is a bit unusual, in my opinion, that it prints things into the file backwards. So hopefully, there we go. We have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 backwards that we have put in the icon there. So that's successful save of the file, but we can do better. We can come to the item in the menu item. We can first of all tell it we want it to respond to a key press. It'll be on key, and the save key press is normally F3. And you'll be glad to know that T-Wimp doesn't let you use F12 for obvious reasons. And if I press F3, that opens up. I haven't had to program anything in. When I press F3, when it's in this icon, it will check if it's an on-key F3 event for the icon. Then it will check the window, and then it will have a look what would happen if you opened up a menu, and it scans down all the menu and all the submenus and does the same as if you'd clicked on here. But if the submenu happens to be a save box, it knows to handle all of that separately and differently and does all of that automatically for you. So adding keyboard shortcuts and things is literally just a few things that you can type. And what is that, about 10 characters, and it's working. We can improve that even more. We could, for example, and this might look scary to somebody because you think initially there's going to be a lot of programming because we're going to make a file info box. Submenu for the file info box, we'll call it file info. So let's create a pre-formatted window, which is file info, and we will call it file info. I won't put any data in there at the moment. We'll just see what that looks like. That gives us a pre-formatted window. Now, obviously, filling all of that in, you would expect would take quite a bit of time. So let's do that in just one line of code. When you've saved or loaded a file in T-Wimp, you should really tell T-Wimp that you have saved or loaded it, and they're just called saved and loaded in the SWI. Following that, we can give a list of windows, and it will update the windows depending on what came in the last pull loop, what the file name was, various things. It will look at where the file is saved and go and read what you've written. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to update 3 things. Let me just double check what they all are. I'm going to update the main window. I'm going to update the save box, and I'm going to update the file info box. And all of them will update, but they'll all update in a different way because they're all pre-formatted and T-Wimp remembers what they all actually are. So we've got a blank file info box, and if I just save this off, the first thing you might have noticed is the title of the window's changed. And that's because I put main window in here. It now knows that that window contains a file. It's set the file name. And if I close this, and I hold down Shift and I just click, that should normally open up a file window. And it does. Normally you have to program that. But T-Wimp jumps in and does all of that kind of thing for you. The save box probably would have been updated anyway, but that's been updated to the full name. And the file info box has been completely updated. It does that by reading all the information from the file that you've just saved. That makes your program look quite professional in just one line of code. So we've gone through quite a bit there. Does anybody have any questions? I can't see whether there's a chat window open or anything.
I've just got a quick question.
Right?
When you're reading data and you're reading it back to a string, so that's a pointer to a buffer in memory, and then BASIC is reading it out, yes?
Correct.
So when you specified that the text length of the writable was 255 bytes, presumably that's not a limit imposed by T-Wimp, that's a limit imposed by the usage of BBC BASIC.
Yes, you can have them as long as you like.
Oh, I must try this with
Well,
Nemo Basic when I can have any length of string.
Well, not quite as long as you like, as you know, but
Yes, yeah,
you know, 20, 30K will crush the Wimp, but that's a problem with the Wimp.
yes.
But yes, you can have them as long as you like. The same with all of these things where you have on-save save, that can be as long as you like. The item names can be as long as you like. Obviously, you're limited by memory only.
Presumably also that call, the T-Wimp read that returns a pointer to the buffer,
Yes.
I'm assuming that you define that that buffer is read only.
It's read only, and you do not get a pointer directly to the information in T-Wimp. It copies it in T-Wimp itself as well.
Okay,
so
good.
even if you were running a module task or using a SWI, even if it does manage to overwrite it, it's not overwriting the actual T-Wimp data.
Yes, just checking.
So yeah, but yeah, it is read only, yes. And when you say it's a pointer to a string, for people who program in C and C++, there is a SWI that you can call. And if this comes back as an empty string or doesn't exist, which can happen in some cases, instead of it returning an empty string, it will return 0. But that's something you need to set at the beginning of your program, so it will match up as if it's a null string. But that's not something you would use in BASIC or Python. That's something more for probably C programmers or assembly programmers would probably like to use that. Any other questions? Nothing so far. Should we go on to something a bit more advanced to show a little bit more of the power? Would you like us to perhaps create, what should we do next? What about loading the file back into some dynamically made windows, so we can have as many windows as we want, rather than having just one in this text file? Let's give that a go. Right. My brain froze for a second there. What were we going to do? Load the file in. Right, okay. There's a few different ways that you might load a file in. First of all, you might drag it to an icon. You might double click the file when your application is running, and you might double click the file when your application is not running. And we're going to do all of them one by one. So what we'll do is we'll start off by getting it to load the note into a dynamically made window by dragging it to the icon bar, where we'll create an action, onload, and the onload command, you can actually put the file type in, so it will filter the file type out. So if somebody drags a different file type, you won't get this, it will be ignored. And we'll just call it load. We need to handle load in our program here. Load. The load actually is fairly similar to the saved routine. So we will copy that, where we read pull data file name into a string. I will open the file, but for reading this time. Open for reading. We don't need to give it the file type. We will add. This isn't going to be the best programming in the world because we are going to assume that the file format is correct, just for the speed of the demonstration. So we'll read the two things that we saved into the file, and then we will close the file. And again, I've used the T-Wimp open and close. And that should be enough to load the file in. Obviously, we're not displaying anything yet, but we can check that that's loaded in. There's a nice little software interrupt called T-Wimp error. And the first parameter you give it is just the error string. So we'll just check that time, and note $. Will appear in a WIMP error box. What I'll do is I'll create something called the note, because I think I saved it off with a blank one last time, into there. And if we drag this to the icon bar, we'll hopefully get the time that was saved, and we don't. So there's our first issue. I've called it notes plural. It should be notes singular. We drag this in. Yeah, and there we go. So that was the time that was saved and our note. So now that we know we've got the data in, we can now move on to making our own dynamically made document. So what I'm going to do first of all is we're going to give each document its own name. So we're going to need to create a variable. We'll call that doc%, and every time we load a file in, we'll just increment that by 1. I'll get rid of that error line. To create a window or any item dynamically, just use T-Wimp create. The format is pretty much the same as the text file. However, we want to call this doc%, which I've called doc there, we want to call the window with that variable, and you'll end up with things like str $doc% plus this, and your code ends up looking horrible and disgusting. It makes it very unreadable. So what we're going to do when we create a dynamic window, and you can do this on lots and lots of different things, is I'm going to actually use a variable, and it makes things just look tidier, much more readable. These are done again in the miscellaneous operation. I'm going to add a variable. I'm going to call it doc, and you need to set this as a string. So I will convert string to doc%. Now, when we create the window, get rid of that bit, we can use that variable that we called doc here, which is the string of doc%, in here, in curly braces, just like that. And most of the SWI calls will accept these variables and switch them on the fly. We can actually call items in T-Wimp. We can use A to Z, 0 to 9, and underscore. There's no rule that says they have to start with a letter. They can start with a number. They can just be a number, as long as it's a string, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to call it doc, which is from doc%. So this first window will be called window 0. Then we'll increase doc%, and the next time we load a file in, it will be creating a window called window 1 and window 2. What I will do now is just say, I can't use a double quote. I can use a single quote in T-Wimp. The text of that window will be notes. It will be auto-sized. And we want it to have, it's pretty much the same as the other ones, no scroll bars. Okay, creating the windows. all well and good, but we also need to open it. So here's another place where we can use that variable rather than typing in string doc%, we could just use doc. We also need to create the two icons in that window, and this is where it gets slightly different from the text file. Every time you get to the end of a text file, or every time you get to the end of a create string, it forgets, it's deliberate, it forgets what menu and what window you're in. And that's because I got myself in a mess once, and it was making icons in all the wrong windows. So we'll make a display icon just like we did here. And I'm going to call it time, but I'm going to do something different. It needs a unique name because the names in T-Wimp are global. So we're going to call this one time doc, and that will initially be time 0, then time 1. The bit that's different is we need to tell it which window we need to make this icon in. And you just use hyphen in and tell it what window or menu you're wanting to create this item in. So we want to create that in our window that we called doc. Do I need to do anything else with that? Yep, I need to set the width of it. We'll set the width of it so that it's wide enough to contain the full text. I'll create the note as well. So this will be note 0, note 1, depending on the window. Again, we'll create it in that document, and I don't need to set the width of that. I haven't updated the text in those icons. Let's hope that that opens a window with 2 blank icons in it. And there we go. Something I haven't shown that can be useful, especially for dynamic areas, is we can use the help system. For example, if I type in help for this icon and say the time, you would expect that to say the time when it hovers over that time icon. That's in the one here, and it will do. So we now have our help saying the time. While you're programming and designing your site, your application, it's a lot easier if we use a miscellaneous operation. We can use debug names, and what debug names does is it doesn't show the help that you've typed in anymore. It shows the help, it should be this one, really, from T-Wimp itself instead. So instead of getting the help that we've typed in, it's telling us what the icon name is and what the position and size of the icon is. That's very, very helpful when you're programming and you can't remember what you've named everything, or you're using things dynamically. This one here, for example, the move it over there so it's clearer. The notes menu, that tells us we haven't set the icon name. It tells you what the menu name is and what the submenu name is, which is a very helpful thing while you're programming. So what I'm going to do is just double check that these icon names are exactly what we expect. Time 0, and the other one should be note 0. Note 0. I'll move it out of the way and I'll drag another one down, and hopefully we should have time 1, which we do, and note 1. All we need to do now, I'll turn that help off. All we need to do now is update the text in these icons. So we could just use update text. We don't have to do it at the same time as creating the icon. We can do it later on. So we're going to update the icon that we called time doc, which is this one. Now time and then document number with time dollar. And the note is just the same thing. With note dollar. Yeah, doing plural again. all being well, we have our create window, we have our load window, and we can load it multiple times. It doesn't, we haven't written any check obviously yet for checking whether the same file is loaded in twice. That would be something that other people could do, and I won't do that for the demonstration. The thing that we could improve on the loading is we should always tell T-Wimp, as I said before, when we've saved or loaded a file. So when we've loaded a file in, tell it we've loaded. That will ensure any messages and everything that the WIMP requires for various things will go back to the WIMP. But what I am going to do is I'm going to update that window. What did we call the window? We just called it doc, didn't we? Doc. So the loaded and saved files can take in the variables as well. And that is the window name that we created here. So it should update the window title when I load a file with the file name. And again, it now knows that that window contains a file, so shift and just click again. That still works. And the title has changed. And such, and as I say, we can load in multiple of these. Just in case, because it wasn't working before, I'm just going to ensure I'm going to unset a variable. Star 012, I don't think that would work. Right. That means we now have the ability to be able to load in the note, but only if you drag it to the icon bar. We double click it, we get the standard Ristos error, even though the application is running. And that's because we've told it only loads when it hits the icon bar. There is, oh, I pressed the wrong button there. Okay. There is a whole lot of options under something called global. And one of the things in global is onload. Onload, again, put the file name in. Just use the same routine. What happens now is when your application is running and this file type is double clicked, it will send load back to your program, and your program will handle it all, and all the messages will be sorted out. Technically, it does it in this bit here, but all the messages are sorted out, and it should just load in. There we go. Loaded in and loaded in again. If the application is not running, we will get the Ristos WIMP error again. Now, this is the bit I can never get right. Ristos has the alias variables, and I can never remember if it's at or dollar, but fortunately it does tell you in stronghead. That's the wrong way around because it colours it. There we go. That's good of it, isn't it? So if we set the run type to run our program when that file is run, it still won't load the file, and we need to pass in the file name, and T-Wimp will look through various things, and if you have -load and then put the file name, it will presume that's the file name. So the way of putting the file name in a bay file is that. I'm sure there's a long, complicated explanation for that, but I don't think we'll be going into that today. So if I run that file, we should have set that variable, and if I double click, the whole thing just loads in. And if I double click again, it doesn't load it again. It loads into the existing application that loaded on my first double click. So now we have the three main methods of the way that you would load a file in under Riscos. So you now have something that's starting to resemble a professional type application. You may remember at the start, I did point out that we had a few pinboard icons, so we might as well use them. The first thing T-Wimp will do if you try and pin something to the icon bar is it will have a look down various things that you've created. One of them will be your application. It will try and match up the IC underscore sprite, which was these two. That one. Oh yeah, can select them. And that one. Because we've called our application notes. No, it's not. No, because the icon is called !notes, it will look up one called notes. Now my pinboard, when I press these down, they iconize to the icon bar. And if I minimize all of these, you'll start to see we do have a proper custom sprite. If I use the editor window and I minimize, ooh, what happened there? Is my icon bar seeming to get full? There we go. It still uses the default sprite. It might be nice, because we've got this secondary sprite here, to have the editor window use that sprite instead. I can't remember why I called it MN on the end, but our editor window is in here, and I've just called it mini sprite. Type in the sprite name. And now, if we load in a file and minimize it, we have the standard. But if we minimize the editor one, we have the one with the little edit pen on it as well. Already starting to look a little more professional, a little more usable for the user. Makes it much clearer. And there's lots of little tiny things like this that it's doing in the background that you probably would hardly ever notice unless you've programmed the WIMP, and sometimes programmed it quite in depth in the past. It's been a bit of a learning experience for myself, to be honest. There's a lot of things the WIMP does or doesn't do that I didn't know before I started programming this. The other thing that's nice is those variables that I created can be used in so many different places. So if I create a variable after we've started our application, miscellaneous up, and I'm going to call it time call. What we're going to do, nope, I haven't done that right, have I? I need to tell it, I need to add a variable and call it time call. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type into here what I want all of those time icons to be, and I'm going to change the background color on them all. So I'm going to put background color, let's say cream. You can now use that variable, because we're loading the file in afterwards, in this file here. So when we've got displayed time, I use the variable again with the curly braces, call it time call. And I can do the same in our program. I can put time call, and that will replace all of them with this background color cream. So we now have that's in cream, and when we load in our other file, it's cream. And if you decide you don't like that color scheme, and you decide you want it to be blue, open up a second one. And that's fine. And I'll load it in. I'll have to drag it, I think. That second one is loading them in, creating them in blue, which is the kind of thing that's very helpful for setting up color schemes or things that you're regularly typing in. One thing I did use it for, because I've made this application before, what I'll do is I'll take it out of here. And I'll set it to something sensible. And in our loading in window, we have the time the note was created. And what I did in a previous version was we could have an extra icon called Time Now in the document. Let's test that. So we should have 3 icons when I load this in. So we've now got 3 icons. The top one is the time now. The next one is the time the note was saved, and the bottom one is the note. If we want to update all of these, that's going to be quite a bit of a pain to go through all of the windows, updating all of those times. But what we can do is we can update things in groups. So if I take this display time and put it in a group, and I'm going to call it G underscore, that's just what I do for a group name, G underscore time, just makes it different. We don't want it to clash with any of the other names, as we'll see in a second. And I'll put the time now in the basic program in the same group. G underscore time. Now, when you run that program, at the moment, there's absolutely no difference whatsoever. It doesn't matter that we've put them in these groups. But if we change the very bit that we did at the start, where we've got the timer, and we change that to G underscore time, and you may notice that it's in a different case. Doesn't matter in most things in T-Wimp. You'll see it still updates the time here, and it updates the time in here. It goes through all of the groups and updates them all. So you now have a clock running on every window that you've got open, so you can see what the time is now and when you save the note. And again, we might decide that the time now should be in the time color, which was that time color. And now we set that to cream. The current clock time is always in the cream color. We can even update lots of things by the group. So where I've put in the background color cream, maybe we could have that time cream option. Maybe if we click adjust or select, we could have a different color scheme. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the foreground color to be automatic. And we will add an on-select. Well, we'll just do an on-adjust one to start off with. On-adjust to change the color. We tell T-Wimp, so we use the subtract sign to update. Running out of space now. G-time, which is the group. And then we tell it what we want to update. So I'll put them in some single quotes. And we want to update the background color. Let's say to something dark, let's say blue. And hopefully, we should be able to load in a few files. And when we click adjust on any of these times, They're all changed to blue. But the text is also changed to white because it's realised, done the calculation to work out whether the text is too dark and whether it should be white. And I'm sure Nemo will say the calculation's a little bit wrong, but
I wouldn't dream of saying a word.
you wouldn't dream of it. But it seems to work in general. You can, of course, set the colour manually if you want to. You don't have to use the automatic colour scheme. It also supports through most of it, not everything, 24-bit colour and lots of named colours. So if we change the background colour to pink, when I click adjust, that changes that to pink. We can set the background colour, I don't know, to 14. I'm trying to avoid cream. That would be a wimp colour. Don't know what 14 is. Happens to be orange. The third way of setting a colour is HTML with a hashtag, and then you use 3 or 6 hex digits, and this is in the same format as HTML, so you can go online and use a colour wheel if you want exact specific colours, but it would be your hex values of your red, let's say that, your green, and let's say your blue. 40. No idea what colour that would be. Oh, that's a shocking colour. And that probably doesn't display too great over the NC.
I'm not sure about your luminance calculation there, mate.
No, that does seem. Do you think that should be black, do you?
I think you'll find if you do a proper calculation, yes.
Right. Right.
You have
Yeah,
the
that-
wrong number of angels dancing on the head of your pin there.
Yeah, it was just something that was mentioned on the forums, and I looked up the algorithm and thought, I'll give it a go and see whether I can do an automatic colour. So it's something that's actually only been done in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, that could probably be due with being refined.
It'll probably be gamma that's killing.
Yeah, I don't think there's any gamma calculation. And it's just calculated from the red, green, blue. I don't know. Certainly no expert on the colour
In
schemes
which
of things.
case, don't threshold at 50%. Are you thresholding at 50%?
Yes.
Yes, but that would only work if it was linear light, and it isn't linear light if you're dealing with gamma.
Ah, right.
So your threshold isn't
Okay.
at 50. It isn't numerically at 50.
Right. Okay. We'll probably have to go talk about that on the next coding meeting, maybe. I might be able to show you what calculations I've used, and we could go through it then, maybe. But yeah, there's a whole host of things you can do in here. Anybody got any questions again?
Before we get into too much technical detail, because some people have got to wander off, can I take this chance to say thank you very much, Graeme, for really excellent
Welcome.
presentation of what looks like an exciting product when people get to play with it. That'd be fun to see what
Yeah.
people do. So, round of applause from everyone for Graeme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Graeme.
Thank you.
Oh, this is absolutely phenomenal. I really wished we had this back in the 80s, man.